Hello, I'm James Cridland, the Radio Futurologist, and this is my International Radio Trends newsletter. It's called Radioland. You can get it at radioland.email, and this is the podcast version where I read it out for you in a not very good fashion with a cold. Sorry about that bit. Anyway, this podcast is sponsored by RSS.com, and I thank them for their support. And this is for July the 29th. The MFWs, a new BBC station, and more from Canada. The newsletter version of this also has an excellent little kit that they were selling in Italy in the 1980s, where you could be a pirate radio broadcaster, which is just brilliant and well worth a peek. Anyway, hell has no fury like an MFW. Duncan Campbell, the former content director of ARN, has written about the pressure group Mad Fudging Witches, not their real name. Make no mistake about it, he says, Alan Jones, Carl Sandilands and Carl Stefanovic all lost their jobs because of MFW. Not so sure about Carl. Probably uncritically interviewing Tommy Robinson did that for him. But Campbell suggests we should be concerned that MFW have this kind of influence. MFW targets the advertisers who fund the shows, contacting them directly and making them aware of the content they're funding. Campbell frames it as a free speech issue. He'll be at Radio Days Asia. And so should you be. RadioDaysAsia.com is where to get tickets. For that, it's in Jakarta in early September. Spin Track looks interesting. It's a complete radio station on a Mac Mini, it claims. It's probably understandable that there aren't that many playout systems for the Mac, but it looks interesting to see, I think. It includes voice tracking and live assist, along with hour templates and music scheduling as well, worth a peek. Over in Pod News this week, Sonar with 2 R's, sonarr.au, has been advertising its awards. They're a new audio awards for Australia, including radio, podcasts, audiobooks and voiceovers. You have until this Friday evening to enter. It can be as low as $75 Australian to enter. You're guaranteed not to win if you don't enter, so it's worth a punt. Some quite impressive radio analysis from the Sydney market on Reddit. I link to that. ARN's Gold managed 15 minutes an hour of ads. Wow. If you're hearing an ad on Smooth, the research says there's a 50-50 chance that WSFM is also in an ad at that exact moment. This is a guy who's clearly somebody who cares about radio. I mean, it must be a guy. But anyway, he calls it WSFM despite it having rebranded over a year ago. The comments are, as ever, worth reading if you ever want a glimpse into what normal Australians think of commercial radio here. BBC Radio 6 Music launched a new radio station called BBC Radio 6 Indie Forever, I think. It isn't listed on the BBC.com list of radio stations, and it appears to be unavailable from its BBC Sounds page internationally. The BBC has added a slew of new radio services recently in a bid to attract more users to BBC Sounds and to claw back some listener share from commercial radio. Interestingly, it doesn't work through my VPN either, but perhaps if I connected to Manchester instead of London, Manchester's where everything's going on these days, isn't it? Then perhaps I might be able to have a listen, so maybe I should give that a go. Paul Larson has written about what the Rogers closures really tell us, highlighting the closure of 6 spoken word stations across Canada a few weeks ago. He highlights the regulatory issues which stop Rogers from simply selling the stations. And he says, I believe the current regulatory system is partially responsible for outcomes like the Rogers station closures. I wholeheartedly agree with him. He's also a man with experience. The CRTC took almost 12 months to approve the sale of his radio station. And interestingly, he suggests that 20 years ago it took only 90 days. So I wonder what's changed in terms of that. Another Radioland reader pointed me to the tangible benefits requirement of the CRTC. Now, if a radio company sells a license in Canada, it's got to pay at least 6% of the sales value to a variety of organisations, 4.5% to musician funds, 0.5% to community radio, and 1% to a content development fund. And those fees are required unless the station has made significant financial losses over at least 5 consecutive years. Handing the licences back, of course, meant that Rogers isn't liable for those payments. I wrote an opinion piece for Pod News suggesting that podcast apps should get a cut of the revenue from podcast advertising. About 15 years ago, I worked for radio receiver manufacturer Pure for a while, and realised that pretty quickly that radio receiver manufacturers have a totally different set of priorities than the radio broadcasters who depend on them. And the same is true of podcast app developers as well. And I do think that there's something in my suggestions in the piece. I'd be really appreciative of your comments, or indeed of sharing the article if you want to take a quick peek at that. Radioland.email, of course, is where you can see this newsletter and see the link to it. And 42 Odyssey radio stations are to be rebroadcast nationally by SiriusXM, kind of. They'll be in the SiriusXM app, and they'll be available in cars that have SiriusXM 360L, which is a hybrid delivery service that uses both satellites and IP to deliver audio. It's an interesting move anyway. It widens the choice available for SiriusXM users and the reach of the Odyssey channels. And isn't it interesting that it's Odyssey that they are doing this with and not iHeart, who they were rumoured to be merging with only a couple of months ago? Where am I speaking next? Well, Radio Days Asia, of course. In Jakarta in Indonesia. I'll be keynoting on radio's international trends and its future there. I'd like to see you there too. RadioDaysAsia.com is where to go. Also, I'll be present at least at Podcast Movement New York City between September the 14th to the 18th. It does look as if I might not be speaking. Anyway, that will be a fun event to go to nonetheless, and looking forward to that. Also, I will be speaking on the 1st of October in London somewhere. They haven't announced me yet. Can't tell you quite where. But anyway, I'm there and looking forward to that. And I may also be in Berlin for a very short amount of time after that. And thank you to the supporters of my newsletter, including Play It Software, Broadcast Radio, Radio.co, Brunn Audio Consulting, and Soma FM. Thank you, Rusty, for your kind support. Thank you also to personal supporters Dafydd Fernham Marty from New York, Gavin Watson, Greg Strassel, Sam Phelps, Richard Hilton, Emma Gibbs, Jocelyn Abbey and James Masterton for being regular supporters. You can join that list, if you like, by buying me a coffee. Buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland is where to go. You can give regularly there. You can just give a one-off coffee or 5 if you like, and that's all good. There is also an email version of this newsletter, as you may have already guessed. Radioland.email is where you can get that. And my website has more details of who I am and what I do and whether I can help you further. My website is at james.cridland.net. And until next time, keep listening.